In this demonstration I'm going to use Delcam Shoemaker version 2011 to create the design you can see on the screen here. This design is a rendering created in Shoemaker using Povray, or also could be created with Lightworks. Okay, so here we have the Shoemaker window, and I'm going to start the process by importing some data. So we're going to start by importing a last, and the last I have is in STL format. So I'll identify the STL triangle files. Shoemaker imports the triangle file for me. So here we can see the last, which was probably captured using digitizing or scanning techniques. Now what we have to do is just identify some points on the last which Shoemaker will use as reference points to align the geometry. So I need to identify 2 points at the heel, zoom in and identify a point at the toe on the feather edge, and then identify a cone point. Move forward in the process. Shoemaker automatically identifies the curves for me. Depending on the quality of the triangulation, we may have to edit a couple of the points on the curves. So I can just pick the points up using the cursor and drag those back onto the feather edge. To make sure our feather edge is well defined. Move forward in the wizard process, and Shoemaker is now splitting the triangles into top surface and bottom surface, and it's fitting a smooth surface through the upper part of the last and the bottom part of the last. We now get the opportunity to change the heel height and toe spring, and also we can adjust the swivel. Finally, we can specify the size of the last. So I'll say this is a European men's size 41, and I'll also enter a small description which is stored with the last itself. Finish the process, and the result is a surface last that we could add to our last library. If I open up the last activity toolbar, we're presented with a series of options or edit operations that we can perform on the last. So the first operation I'll perform is to create a flattening for the last. Now we have a menu with a series of different options that allow us to affect the way the last is flattened. The user has control over the parameters used to flatten the last. So I've taken all of the default options, and you'll see here what we have is the flattened inside and outside curves of the last, with a lasting allowance automatically added, a user definable lasting allowance. We have the flattening of the last bottom, and we also still have the 3D view of the last itself. Now if I come back to the upper flattening, we have some user definable parameters that allow users to edit the way the last upper is flattened. However, some customers already have flat patterns for their existing lasts that they're happy with and they know work. So these flat patterns can be imported, and we can ask Shoemaker to use this specific flattening for the last instead of the calculated flattening. So here you can see now we have two sets of curves. We've got the original flat patterns, and I've just imported some green flat patterns, which are the curves we want Shoemaker to use for the flattening. So I'm going to come in and use the edit shell operation to change both inner and outer. So first of all, the inner, select the pattern that we wish Shoemaker to use, and then repeat that operation for the outer. Again, select the shell pattern that we wish Shoemaker to use. If we save the last, this last is now using the imported flattening for any further flattening operations. So the next thing I'll do is to start to sketch the outline of our design onto the last. So I'm entering into the sketching mode, and I can now use the cursor and the mouse to sketch curves directly onto the last. The curve sketching shows us endpoints, shows us when we're on the center line of the design. We can edit curves, I can extend curves, break curves, etc. Okay, so I can sketch the curves. If I wanted to then change the shape of one of the curves, I can just simply highlight the curve, highlight the point, and start to drag the point around to make changes to the design as I want to. Okay, if I delete those curves, another option that we have is to import an image of a design that we wish to recreate. So here I've imported a bitmap image, and I'm now going to try to match the last and the bitmap image. We can change the transparency of the bitmap image so we can see through slightly better. I can also make changes to the image itself. We can make the image bigger or smaller, we can stretch it to get a good match between the two. When I'm happy, I can lock the two together, and you can see now as I move the last in and out, the image goes with it. If we change the view direction, the image will disappear, and it's very easy to get it back. So we can now use that image to sketch through as a stencil to start creating our construction curves, in this case to possibly recreate this design. So we're sketching straight through the imported image directly onto the last itself, like so. And again, if I just rotate the view, you can see there's the curve created. Okay, so at this point what I'll do is actually jump to a different part with the same last, where I have all of the style lines created for this design. So once all the curves and style lines are in place, we can start to use those style lines to create the shoe pieces. So I can zoom in, and I've got the choice. I'm clicking on one of the style lines, and then we can guide the style line creation around the region where we want the shoe piece to be constructed. Okay, so there you can see I've now got my first piece created, and if I look from the side, you can see we have a default offset from the last, a default thickness, default edge colour, default outside colour. If I just remove the last itself, we've also got a default inside colour for the shoe piece that we've just constructed. Okay, again, if I just enter piece creation, second method of creating the pieces, instead of chaining together a closed region, I can give a single left button mouse click in the region where I want the shoe piece to be constructed, and I can allow ShoeMaker to search left and right until it finds the closed region for me, and again the shoe piece is constructed. Any entity in ShoeMaker can be double clicked to open up some of the edit operations for that entity. So here I can double click this shoe piece and set the thickness to be slightly smaller, so in this case 1mm. Also the material, we have a large library of different materials that we can use. Here is a small selection of them. I can now drag and drop these materials from the library onto the piece, and the piece will update accordingly. If I zoom into the edge, we can do exactly the same on the edges of the pieces. So again, just drag and drop from the library onto the edge, and we change the material used. Exactly the same for the inside material as well. Another option we have is to create a treatment on a shoe piece. So here I'm going to select one of the edges of the piece and then choose a treatment. So in this case I'm going to change this to be a folded edge. And that will have the effect of rounding off the edge that we selected, like so. Okay, so I've set this one shoe piece up exactly as I want it, and I want the shoe piece on the opposite side to have the same properties. So instead of repeating myself, I can use this paste attributes tool and we can paste all of the properties from one shoe piece to another, which is a very fast method of setting up all of the parameters, styles, thicknesses for the design. So let me just turn on the level where we have the rest of the shoe pieces constructed, and you can see here we can apply detail such as padding. So here on this collar we've applied padding to the inside, and if I remove the last, also padding to the outside as well. The next entity to be created is some stitching, and I'm going to open up the stitching library. ShoeMaker has a library of different stitch patterns that the user can choose from: cross stitching, double row stitching, etc. And there's a few different ways which stitching can be applied to the design. So the first method I'll show you is just straightforward sketching of a stitch curve. So here we're sketching a curve, and you can see every point I click is extending the curve and creating a row of stitches, and it doesn't matter if this stitch curve goes from one piece to another and they're different heights, the thing will just roll straight from one to the next. I'll delete that. Now, a very common method of applying stitching is using the edges of the part. So here I've dropped into part edge stitching mode. I've selected the part that I want the stitches to be applied to, and now I'm interactively selecting just the edges where I want the stitches to be applied. So I'm missing out any curves which are touching the feather edge of the last, and just applying rows of stitching to the other edges of the part, like so. Now these part edge stitches at the moment are linked to the part themselves, so if I need to make changes to those, I'm just going to free them from the edge of the part, and then if I zoom in we can make some changes. So let's say we wanted to change the style of stitching. I can just drag a cross stitch pattern from the library onto the row of stitching to make the change and edit the stitch pattern itself. And also the separation, we can double click the stitches to open up the edit operations for stitching, and I can use the clicker bars just to increase the separation gap to make everything look correct. And let me just turn on my level with the other stitching already created. Moving on from stitching, the next thing on the list is piping, and again there's a couple of different ways we can apply piping to a design. So the first method is to straightforward sketch a pipe, like so. So I can just click the points and the pipes are created through the points on the curve, like so. The more common method of applying pipes is to existing curves. So if I drop into this mode, we can then pick the curve where we want the pipe to be applied, and the pipe is automatically applied to that curve using some default values. And once the pipe is created, I'll zoom in on the first one I created and reselect it, and that will give me access to the edit operations for the pipe. So here I'm going to increase the size of the pipe, and we can see the real size by hanging the tooltip text to give us the readout of the current size. And also I wish to change the material of the pipe, so again open up the materials library and I can drag and drop a material from the library onto the pipe to make that change. Once I'm happy with the pipe, again I'm going to say copy the attributes from that pipe, and I can then spin round to the second one and paste those attributes to make the pipe on the other side match. And if I just undraw the last, and let's just do some dragging and dropping of the correct inside material. Like so, to make sure everything matches. Moving on to punches. Again, clicking the punch button brings up the operations down the left hand side, and again we have a library of punches which contains different punch patterns, different punch shapes, triangles, squares, rounds. And you can see here we've already got some punch patterns, some punch holes applied to the part. So I'll show you the process for applying these now. Let me zoom this around to the area where I wish to apply the punches. So drop into punch sketching mode, choose the style of punch that I want to sketch with. So in this case it's a circular pattern of holes. Sketch the row of punch patterns exactly where we want them to be. We can change the separation, change the size, change the angle, the rotation. I can also come in and just pick up the end and slightly modify the end to get an additional punch if we wish to. Now this is just sketch the punch geometry. To actually apply those to the part, I can choose one of the punch options. So here I'm just going to apply it through the single part itself that the punches sit onto, and ShoeMaker automatically understands that this punch was sketched onto that part, so we don't have to identify the part itself. To make the symmetrical design, I'm just going to make a linked mirror of that punch pattern to the opposite side of the design. And let me just select that row of punch curves. I'm going to break the link between the two, and that frees me up to make some slight changes to the row of punches. So I'm just going to come in and use the cursor to grab hold of these points and just slide them along the surface to get this row of punches on this side looking as I want it. And again, apply the punches to the part, and once again ShoeMaker already understands what part is underneath those punches, so we don't have to identify the part itself. And those punch holes are applied straight through the part like so. The next thing I'll do is to add some accessories to the design, and I'll start by first of all open up the accessory toolbar, and also I'll open up the accessory library. So accessories, or our accessory library, contains a range of 3D objects, eyelets and lugs, different buckles and hooks. So here I'm going to select an eyelet, and we can apply these accessories in different ways. So first of all, if I make a double click of one of the accessories, I can position this at any location on the design, like so. It's quite common to need to create strings of accessories. So here, if we drop into accessory curve creation and then select the accessory we wish to sketch onto the surface, and I can again start to click points to make an accessory curve. So here I'm just going to click 2 points to make the string of accessories, like so. Again, I can double click the accessory, in this case to bring up the edit operations and change the number of accessories that are hanging on the string. And also we've got different edit operations to change the separation, change the rotation of the accessories and the size of those accessories as well. Once I've created my first set of accessories, I can create the same chain on the opposite side of the shoe by creating a linked mirror operation. And also at this point, if I wanted to, open up the material toolbar, and I can drag and drop the material I want from the toolbar onto the accessories like so. And now I've got those accessories in place, I'm going to move forward to the laces activity, and here I can choose from one of the many different types of lace styles, and the accessories I've added to the design are specifically tagged as being able to take laces, so I can just select the 2 strings of accessories, accept the 2, and ShoeMaker will automatically apply laces through the accessories in the style of lace that I've selected from the menu. Again, we can edit the lace pattern, we can edit the length of the laces, the texture of the laces, etc, etc. So the design's looking quite good. Final thing I'll do is move on to the sole activity. Now I've already got a sole created and partially finished and stored on a level which I've just turned on here. So this is the sole that I have. Now this sole is at the moment is unfinished, so I'm just going to do a little bit of work in order to finish this sole off, and I'm going to drop into advanced sole creation mode. So this is where sole surfaces can be constructed, but what I'll do here is just finish the design by wrapping a tread pattern onto these regions on the bottom of the sole. So I'm going to start by identifying my sheet of tread, which at the moment is a flat sheet of tread texture made up of triangles similar to STL triangles. So I'm going through the wrap process. At the moment, ShoeMaker is showing me the tread pattern wrapped onto the shoe. I can now drag the tread pattern forwards and backwards, left and right. We can also change the orientation of the tread pattern, so here I can use the rotate slider bar to change the orientation. We can change the size and the aspect ratio as well if we want to. And finally, I can edit parameters to adjust the height of the wrap tread and specify whether this tread is trimming the underlying surface or not. So here I've turned trimming off because the resulting wrapped triangles will completely cover the surface, so the surface can be deleted underneath. So there you can see we've now got a 3D tread pattern, and it's wrapped onto and around the edges of the sole design. So I'm just going to finish the front part of the design by repeating that process and wrapping the same triangle tread pattern onto the second region at the front of the sole. So again, I'm walking through the wizard. We're creating the wrap map, the checkerboard wrap map pattern. Check the orientation of the tread, make some changes, drag it left and right, adjust the height of the tread pattern, and again wrap the triangle mesh onto the complex doubly curved surface, and very simply create this extremely detailed tread pattern on a doubly curved surface like so. Okay, the final thing I'll do is I'm going to pick this surface like so, and we're going to make some changes. At the moment this is flat, we actually want a pattern on the surface, so I'm going to edit the surface directly here to create the pattern that I want. I'm going to start by entering some values, so I actually want to select every curve in a range of 2 to 6 and every second point in a range of 2 to 12. So that selects a pattern of points on the surface, and then I'm going to edit those points. I'm going to drop into edit mode, and the edit operation I'll perform on those points is an offset operation. I can enter the offset value, and we change the shape of the surface directly, creating this pattern on the bottom of the sole. Accept the changes, take that sole back into ShoeMaker, and you can see there is our very detailed sole matching perfectly onto the upper, the detailed upper that we've designed in ShoeMaker. And finally, if I just return to the flattening view, you can see in the 2D flattening view that all of the curves we sketched to create the pieces of the shoe are automatically flattened because the flattening is stored with the last. When we save this design from ShoeMaker, we save it in a format which is common to all Crispin products. So here I now have jumped over to Crispin Engineer Pro, and I'm going to open my design created in ShoeMaker. It's the same single file format, and you can see in Engineer automatically all of the shoe pieces that I've created are automatically transferred to Crispin Engineer Pro, and if I've applied treatments to the edges of the 3D pieces as I've created them in ShoeMaker, those treatments are automatically carried over to Engineer as well. Finally, if you have the need for marketing materials or high quality images, it's possible to drop into rendering mode, where we have lots of settings for lighting and floors, reflection, environments, backgrounds, etc., that allow us to create some very detailed ray traced rendered images of the shoe itself.